This is a reading from the Diary of Jesus by Jean Aulagnier. November 24th, Wednesday. Jesus told his disciples that the moment had come for them to begin their mission. They were to start baptizing the next day. November 25th, Thursday. Over 100 people came. From then on, the place was going to be filled with people coming to see and hear the Master. Jesus spoke about God's omnipresence. He said, "All the actions of men are done in God's presence. All the actions of men." A dreadful word, and a comforting one. He then commented on idols for a long time. He did not speak so much about visible idols as those which secretly rule inside people's hearts. November 26th, Friday. Herod Antipas' foster brother arrived. His name was Manaen. This created quite a commotion, although he was a disciple of John the Baptist. Jesus took this opportunity to tell the crowd that God is God of all. God therefore welcomes pagans with a pure soul and rejects Israelites whose soul is impure. November 29th. There were so many pilgrims that Jesus started preaching in the mornings. On that day he spoke about the behavior expected of children towards their parents. November 30th or December 1st. Jesus introduced himself as the doctor who prescribes remedies for souls that are ill. He then focused on those who seek pleasure as an end in itself. December 2nd, Thursday. The feast of dedication was drawing near. Jesus spoke about the importance of respecting feast days, as well as the day of the Lord, since those days belong to God. It is not enough, he said, just to have a physical rest. One ought to sanctify those days. On such days, that is, one should carefully examine his conscience. One should humbly admit his own misery and make suitable resolutions for the future. December 3rd, Friday. An old chief of the synagogue was among the pilgrims. His name was Clopas. He was from Emmaus, about 30 miles west. He was impressed by Jesus' harsh condemnation of abortion. Upon leaving, he invited Jesus to Emmaus, and Jesus promised he would honor his invitation. Towards the end of Jesus' sermon, Jonah's master in Esdraelon, Doras, with his mouth full of venom, dared to come to clear water. Jesus abandoned him to the justice and the curse of God the Father. Doras died on the spot. December 4th, Saturday. Simeon, John, and Matthias came by on the Sabbath since their flock was grazing nearby. The 3 shepherds were disciples of John the Baptist, so they told Jesus and the 12 that their master was still free, though pursued. They told Jesus what John the Baptist had replied to his disciples when they said to him, "Rabbi, the one who was with you on the other side of the Jordan, the one you gave testimony to, well, he is baptizing now, and all are flocking to him." Footnote 33, John chapter 3, verse 26. The complete quotation is given previously. See November 23rd. As days went by, the crowds did not dwindle. They brought woes in their wake and left healed. December 5th, Sunday. Jesus sent Simon, Judas, and John to Jerusalem. By then the shepherds had left. December 6th, Monday. Andrew, Jude, James the Great, and James the Less were in charge of baptizing. The others helped Jesus. There was another large crowd. Jesus healed a Roman who was possessed. Now Matthew was a serious man, and he accurately remembered everything that Jesus said. Matthew was not in a hurry. He was far from impulsive. He would mull things over, and all of Jesus' spiritual leaven slowly worked in the dough. Even before he joined Jesus with all his soul, he had placed close attention to Jesus' teachings at the synagogue in Capernaum. During these days at Clearwater, Matthew again heard the same teachings. Footnote 34. Although they were now developed more systematically, editor, and carefully listened to them. There were yet no great parables, no great resurrections of the dead, for now Jesus' teachings was simple. Veils had been allowed to be drawn over eyes and ears, and Jesus taught ways to remove them. Jesus performed healings precisely to reveal to the worthy and unworthy alike that he had authority. If he, in God's name, could restore physical sight and hearing, he could also restore the sight and hearing of faith, again in God's name. Matthew recorded all of this in his mind. He later was the first to put Jesus' words into writing. December 7th, Tuesday. There was still a crowd at Clearwater. Jesus preached his last sermon on the 10 Commandments. Footnote 35. This is how Jesus preached on the 10 Commandments. On November 24th, he preached on the opening words of the 10 Commandments. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 6. After this, he proceeded as follows. November 25th, first commandment. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 7 to 10. November 26th, second commandment. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 11. November 29th, fourth commandment. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 16. November 30th or December 1st, question mark in brackets, sixth commandment. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 18. December 2nd, third commandment. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 12 to 15. December 3rd, fifth commandment. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 17. December 5th, ninth commandment. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 21a. December 7th, 8th and 10th commandments. Deuteronomy 5, chapter 5, verse 20 and chapter 5, verse 21b. Maria Valtorta has no record of Jesus preaching at Clearwater on the 7th commandment. Our Lord did, however, preach on it during some of his sermons on the other commandments, such as the 10th. Editor. December the 8th, Wednesday. Jesus recommended to the many pilgrims not to miss the feast of the dedication of the temple, which was at hand. Footnote 36. This feast, also called the Feast of the Purification of the Temple, always began on Kislev 25 in the official Jewish calendar. In AD 27, this fell on Tuesday, December 14th, and the feast lasted another 7 days. See page 337 for more details on Jewish feasts. Jesus predicted that Peter would never father a child. He told him that his destiny was altogether different. He would be the father of tens of thousands of sons from all nations. December 9th, Thursday. Since people were getting ready for the feast, no pilgrims came to Clearwater. Jesus and 9 of his disciples were having supper. When Simon, Judas, and John walked in carrying many parcels, they had run into Jonathan, who was on his way to see Lazarus. Jonathan gave them a letter for Jesus. It was from his mother. They also told Jesus that Lazarus and Joseph of Arimathea advised him not to remain at Clearwater during the feast. This was because the Sanhedrin might be planning some trouble. Jesus accepted their advice. They all set out for Dock later in the evening. Jesus wanted to be in Bethany before the Sabbath. December 10th, Friday. They arrived in Dock in the morning, and Jesus healed a woman who had cancer. They covered 20 miles and made it to Bethany before sundown. Jesus decided to stay in Simon's house to avoid causing trouble for Lazarus. Lazarus came over to greet everyone and told Jesus that his younger sister Mary of Magdala had secretly come. Jesus preached to the crowd in the evening. Mary of Magdala hid behind a hedge in order to be within earshot. Jesus spoke for her sake without seeming to. December 29th, Wednesday, the Feast of Lights. See page 337. The Feast of Lights was coming to an end. Jesus was planning to leave the next day. Lazarus prepared a special gathering at his home, and Jesus had supper with him. The shepherds also came to the reception. Isaac, Levi, Joseph, and Jonathan were present, and their flocks spent the night in Lazarus' stables. On this occasion, Matthew prophesied, unawares, that he would write a gospel. December 30th, Thursday. Jesus and his disciples left early in the morning and went back to Clearwater. They arrived a little before noon. The steward ran into Andrew, the kind disciple, and told him that Jesus' enemies had come on Monday. Judas ran back yelling, "The Pharisees are still here." Jesus did not move. The Pharisees came to him and demanded that the group leave Judea. Jesus was majestic. He kindly yet fearlessly tried to bring them to his point of view. Alas, not a single peaceful word was uttered by them. All excitedly cursed him. Jesus wept at the sight of their lost souls. Jesus visited the steward in the afternoon. December 31st, Friday. Early in the morning, Jesus visited the chief of the local synagogue. The Pharisees had insulted him too, so he set out to the west. Footnote 37. Jesus had promised Clopas he would go through Emmaus before heading north to Galilee with the Master. The Pharisees had insulted him too, and so he set out to the west with the Master and all his disciples. AD 28, January 2nd, Sunday. They arrived at the residence of Clopas, another chief of the synagogue. After a long, hard walk and a stop for the Sabbath, Jesus preached there. On this occasion, Jesus welcomed the man called Joseph. Joseph had just been victimized in a shady business of divorce and adultery. The people ostracized him.